also, once we decide what needs to be done with the HF for Home with Flowers again, I just need to know if that's definitely what we're gonna be, because they need to be ordered around April.
Oh, because I figured I would just do that. Or do we do that through the DPW? Or?
Yeah, we do that through DPW. We either
Okay.
use Mitchell's or
The one there on Grange Hall.
Mitchell's is up on.
Yeah, I know where
North-
Mitchell's is,
and
but
then
there's
we
that other
use,
one on Grange Hall.
No, we use Halls Nursery because they do
Yes,
our
I love Halls.
Yeah, they do our downtown flowers.
Perfect.
So,
I was supposed to press play.
I know last year Mitchell wasn't able to get, didn't have enough of what we needed, so we went with Halls. So.
Okay. And there's a spigot out there for watering? Okay. Perfect.
I have a question on the spring cleanup. Are we going to start at 8:30?
Well, yeah, we have to be there when they arrive, because they won't know what to do.
So 8:30 to 4:30.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for pointing that out.
The walkthrough's what time again?
Our parks walkthrough, let me look it up. It was in March.
March 19th
Yeah,
at noon.
noon, okay.
Okay.
Thanks, Greg.
At Water.
I remember that.
Okay, so moving on, National Fitness Campaign. Did anybody get a chance to go out and take a look at the exercise equipment in White Lake? That's the closest one to us. Yeah.
I was on White Lake too.
I did. I went out and looked at it. It was very awkward because that particular setup is in subdivision. Like they probably wrapped it into the dues of the association.
Okay.
There's no parking. That you like have to walk there from your house.
Right.
So it was like I really felt like I stuck out.
Right.
I tried it out. I uploaded the app. I used the app. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was very good. It was a great workout, very easy to do. However, the setup, the layout of it, in my opinion, doesn't really complement our historical parks. It's very modern. And it looks beautiful. It looks trendy. Also, I saw that they had a point. It looks like it's a new installation, all new sod around it, but they already have a point of failure on one of the pieces of metal where it's rusting out. My guess is that it's scratched, and then because it does not look like it was from wear and tear. But so I would be, if we are going to move forward with this, I'm very concerned about what those replacement costs are. I went online and tried to find out what it would cost to do replacements, and it's something you can access. You have to get their price list sent to us.
Okay.
And the rep was already up front with us that it's on the high end of public sports equipment, which we already know is very expensive. So I definitely have a concern about doing that. However, I also went on Facebook and on our parks page and on our and on some of the local pages, I posted, just throwing that out there, the idea and what's the input. And the majority people were for, but I would say 2/3 for and 1/3 against. Not half and half, but the primary concern a lot of people had was, let's spend our money on improving things that are already there before we're investing more. That was what I was noticing. So I think that it's something that would be really worthwhile for us to consider, especially working into our master plan, of having more exercise equipment available to the public, but maybe not that particular model, that particular program. Just my own idea, I was thinking, it would be lovely to see something like what we used to have once upon a time at Lakeside Park, but maybe stations where you walk all the way around the park. Like we could do that in the half-mile loop we have around Waterworks, or we could do that around Cyclone when we're redoing Cyclone Park. I think something like that really blends in more with the background of the naturescapes that we already have there is more appropriate than, say, a 20 by 30, I think it was, square of metal and iron and
Yeah, I see what you're
concrete.
saying.
But those are just that's my opinion, only my opinion. But I do think it's something we should look into doing, but I'm very concerned about maintenance costs.
Well, staff, we talked about it, and what we recommend is wait and not apply during this grant cycle, but wait till 24's grant cycle. That way we'll have a better idea of where the village offices are gonna end up.
And
Because I
placement.
know there was a lot of support for it as long as it was going to be part of that overall improvement at Cyclone. So if we don't end up at Cyclone, then we don't, start the grant process and we give ourselves another year to
Yeah.
discuss it and maybe possibility of looking at some other options. I know several years ago, I looked at replacing the existing workout stations at Waterworks, Lakeside
Lakeside.
Park. And they've gone to all plastic, but, for obvious reasons, metal bars and stuff like that. But the cost was, I believe, upwards of $100,000. So with this opportunity, there is grant money, and we have the ability to try to partner with businesses or, for sponsorships and that kind of stuff. So those
Yeah.
are just some things to consider. I know that with the ARPA funds that have become available, there is money floating out there for recreation purposes. Not, the village has already allocated what we've gotten, but I'm saying, and maybe in the future there may be more opportunities. But right now, that was one of the things that attracted staff to this, was the possibility that, there was not gonna be a large expense on our part, and we were gonna get a large investment in the community. So
Yeah.
that's what staff recommends, is maybe we wait until the 24 grant cycle to revisit this, and then we'll have a better idea where we're gonna be at in terms of the village offices and the overall, what we wanna do overall at Cyclone Park.
Yeah.
Brian, the
I
old one
agree.
at Lakeside, what happened there again? The wooden ones with the last thing that was taken down was the pull-up bar.
The pull bar had rotted, and somebody
It
had
did rot?
actually
Okay.
fallen and hurt themselves, so it was
Okay.
reported. When we looked out and tried to figure out if it would have been feasible to try to fix it and line it back up, and it wasn't, so we just removed that section of it. Left the lower hanging bar. I mean, for a kid, that was fine, but
Right.
I don't know if it was a young teen or whatever.
Okay.
He jumped up there and the bar spun and they fell and they
Yeah.
injured their arms.
Wonder if it was 5 people hanging on it or something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, the
They
bar,
were old.
The bar itself spun.
The whole system
because
was
it
old.
wasn't- It had started to rot, and when we went up and looked at it, the post down at the bottom was rotten out. and
Okay. All right.
So
And
that was the last of that, but I know there was some
so pretty much
interest,
all of them rotted out.
yeah, several years ago about it, and I looked into it, and they don't make the wood ones anymore, it's all plastic, but it was a substantial cost then, so.
Okay, good enough.
I know
That was nice.
we were bringing up grants and stuff through that, and so I did some research too on they have this thing called the Michigan Spark grants, and they started it last year, but that was the first cycle, and there's 2 more cycles, and it'll open sometime here in 2023, and you can apply for it. You do not have to have matching funds. You do not have to have a master plan. I printed
do it.
out a couple.
Let's do it.
Right? That's what I figure. And here's the thing, too, is say we get rejected in this second round, we can still apply for the third round, which will be later in 2023, too. And they've got kind of like timelines of when you have to use it. And 2024 is you've got to have the money basically allocated to a contractor. But that might be something for us to look into, to carry over the costs of this as well. And you can use it for any kind of like buildings, like bathrooms, which, I think that would be
We
great
need
for
bathrooms.
Lakeside. So I can pass out some of the stuff to you guys after this, but yep, I printed out a couple of these, and hopefully we can try to go for it.
Yeah. On that note, too,
Thank you.
we need bathrooms, we need grant money, it would be really nice to see if we're able to do this whole rehab on the building in Cyclone, to add public bathrooms to there.
Right.
But also Crapo Park having a bathroom could be used by all of the downtown events, too. And it'd be nice to see bathrooms at least those 2, in addition to Lakeside.
Right.
I don't know
Agree.
how it'd be good to see bathrooms at Waterworks too, but that's quite an endeavor.
Yeah.
There's no
Um, But that would be, you know, we really potentially can do a lot more events at Waterworks, with especially river events. Be nice to have bathrooms
and
over there.
partner, more with the Shiawassee.
Right.
I know they do cleanups.
Okay, so does anybody have anything else they need to discuss about the National Fitness Campaign? Okay. Moving on to master plan.
Nick is working on it. Chris, did he send you an email? Or
I
a phone
never
call?
got it. He asked for my email address. I wonder if,
He needs some clarification on some information
Right.
that you turned in. So if you
Yeah.
get a hold of him.
yeah, I
you
got a
should-
text from him and then but I never did get the email, so.
Okay,
Oh,
so,
okay.
Yep. I'll let him know that,
Yeah.
and then we'll try to get the email clarified, but once he gets that information, we should have an update for March, and then we can do a public hearing at the April meeting,
Okay.
and then, we can move forward from there.
Pushing that out farther than. I did meet with Nick about the master plan, going over all of our notes and how we were doing it in meetings that we had had. And he did make it known it was more involved and more to do than what he was originally anticipating, which is true. It's a big
Good
endeavor,
job.
and it's a huge favor to us that he's doing that. I'm very appreciative. Okay, so then we're gonna move on to the consideration of the Shiawassee River Trail Liaison. So we discussed this last time. I was hoping that since we have, you, David Lausing, in the audience, would you mind approaching the podium and could you give us a better description of what's required of the liaison and what's expected?
Sure. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm also on the agenda about the Hi-Fi Gauge. I'm the chair of the Shiawassee River Water Trail Coalition. We're a 501c3 organization that we've made that leap from having the Friends of the Shiawassee and Owasso act as their fiduciary now to our very own nonprofit. And so our board is made up of 34 organizations, and we did that on purpose so that we could leverage the strengths of all the organizations along the river from Holly to Chesaning. And the village and the township of Holly have been one of the key founders of the Water Trail Coalition back in 2017 when we submitted the application to the National Park Service. So each organization gets a delegate and an alternate. Chris Rankin has been your delegate, and I've listed Brian as your alternate for the last 5 years. And we meet on a quarterly basis. We used to do every single month back in 17, 18, 19, and then when COVID hit, we went to Zoom like everybody else did. And then we peeled it back to basically quarterly meetings because we'd rather have folks outside playing on the river. And with all the organizations we have them kind of plan all their own work, and we act as kind of the umbrella organization in a sense. So it's a lot of collaboration, but not any competition between our groups, which I think makes us very special in that way. So each organization in the village is a member of our group, gets a delegate and an alternate. So I understand that you're looking for a new delegate to represent the village, and we would gladly accept whoever name you put forward. Our 4 meetings, we basically rotate them around the river itself. So we get to see everybody's backyard in that sense, and get a feel for what's going on their part of the river that you may not have seen before. Because what's here in the headwaters is very different than what's in Chesaning, Michigan, 88 miles away from here, believe it or not. So, yeah, we would welcome anybody that wants to participate. They could be an elected official, they could be a member of the Board of Park and Rec, or they could be a resident of the village of Holly. It's your call as to who that person is. All I need is all of their contact information so I can politely harass them to come to the meetings and that stuff, you know. We have listservs, so we send out email messages to everybody. We have on that listserv about 150 people, folks that have expressed an interest in the water trail itself. So not only reps to the organizations, but the general public as well. So that's the basic organization of the Water Trail Coalition. If anybody has any questions?
So the meetings are gonna be in different locations,
Yes, ma'am.
and they
So our
could be
first
as far
meeting-
as 88 miles away.
Yes, so the first meeting this year is going to be March 23rd. That's likely going to be in the Fenton area because we're working with students from the University of Michigan on a project, and that's the closest, for them to come up from Ann Arbor to Fenton, which would be great. Then after that, it'll be June, September, and December. And December, we're typically in Chesaning, and that's where we have our annual meeting at one of their local restaurants. So we try to get around the river system as much as we can and find volunteers to host. So We could even bring it into Holly, into your council chambers, into this building, because I know it's used for a lot of public events, and we've actually had events in this building for the Water Trail Coalition in the past 5 years.
Mhm.
And what do you discuss at the meeting today?
So one of the projects we're working on this year are, and part of my presentation tonight is the hi-fi gauges. We're working also with Headwaters Trails about putting in mile marker posts. They did the first 7 miles between Holly and Fenton about a decade ago, and they received grant funding to go from Fenton all the way to Chesaning. And we're looking at kind of watershed-related activities. So we know, and we have addresses of all the parcel owners along the river for 88 miles to do best practices on shoreline preservation for both residential properties as well as commercial and agricultural properties, so that we don't have a lot of sediment runoff into the river itself and fertilizer, which then spreads the growth of everything else. We want to tackle aquatic invasive species, both in the river as well as along the riverbank itself. There's a lot of Phragmites here in this part of the neck of the woods, but we do see it downstream from you as well. So it's all about kind of best practices and figuring out what everybody's doing in their own backyard, but then also encouraging people to come and play in their backyard. So you don't have to drive north to the Ossabaw River to do it. You can come to Holly and Fenton and Linden and so forth and recreate there and spend your money locally. Because the river trails really are kind of a sense of place conversation, and it's economic development to bring people into your communities.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, well, thank you.
Sure.
Did you have, anybody else have any other questions about what would be required of that position?
Thank you.
Okay. So we have 2 ways that we can do this. If anybody on this commission is available and willing to take that on, we can name that person now. Or if you guys, if you have any idea of somebody that would be a good delegate, somebody that would be knowledgeable of, our water systems and using them specifically, it's who I think would be good. Does anybody on this commission have the ability to take that on? You would?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So then we're gonna nominate Chris Summers for that. And then Chris, can you make sure you get your contact information to him? Okay, good.
I will get it before I leave.
Perfect. So then that's done.
March 23rd, you said?
Yes, sir.
That should be okay by then.
6:30 p.m.
The community center?
We will get that settled
Okay.
shortly. We've got somebody working on that.
Okay, moving on to general business. So we have a presentation from Mr. Lawson. Do you need him to state his name and address and when he's presenting
Yes.
on our agenda?
No
Okay.
problem.
Yeah, name and address and just who you with is always good.
Yes. So good evening again. David Lawson, 211 Hickory Street, Linden, Michigan, 48451. As I mentioned before, I'm the chair of the Shiawassee River Water Trail Coalition. I represent the city of Linden on the Water Trail Coalition. Previously, I served as the mayor of the city of Linden for 12 fun-filled years until retirement in 2016. And so I've taken on this as my new project since we became both a state water trail by the Michigan DNR in 2018 and then a national water trail by the United States National Park Service in October of 2020. So with state water trails, we are one of 9 in Michigan, and of national water trails, we're one of 5 in Michigan and 35 across the United States. So it's an awful lot of work that we did to put that application together in 2017. And then we waited, but we always assumed that we would get the designation, we just didn't know when it was gonna happen. And didn't realize it was gonna take 3.5 years after we submitted for it to come through, but it did. It's a great grant for us, and as you're updating your master plan, I would really recommend that you throw that information into your master plan, that the Shiawassee River is a state and national water trail, because if nothing else, as you apply for grant funding, it'll give you extra points, for sure, as you compete against other communities, because the rarity of having a state and national water trail, and here in Oakland County, there's 2 of them, both the Huron River and the Shiawassee River are both state and national water trails, and the Clinton River is a state water trail. So there's other systems coming online, probably in a couple of years. But one of the projects we're working on is that gauge. It's by Hi-Fi. It was created by Brandon Wong when he was a PhD student at the University of Michigan and the College of Engineering. They have now spun that out into the commercial space, and that provides us real-time data on the depth and flow of the river. These things are mounted on bridge decks, basically, overlooking the river. It works like radar, so it's when you ping it from your smartphone, your tablet, or your desktop computer, it sends a laser beam to the bottom of the riverbed, bounces back up, and we know in real time what the depth of the river is like.
It's
Uh,
not
so-
dangerous to anything in the river?
So it
No, not at all.
gauges it and
So on the outside, on the top of the device, are solar cells, and that's how it keeps the device powered. Internally, there is a cellular-like device, so it reports data back to its main website or your smartphone when you ping it, so we'll know the water depth of the river. And that's important really for a couple of reasons, especially for paddlers, is to know how deep is the river or how shallow is the river. If it's too shallow, and the Shiawassee in this neck of the woods does kind of bottom out in the springtime. Or if it's too deep, if there's a massive rain event, you don't want to go anywhere near the Shiawassee River, to be honest. And also, it will provide us flow data, so we know how fast the river is flowing. And we've identified 8 different sites in both Genesee and Shiawassee County. We have 15 of these devices currently installed. And Hi-Fi received funding from the Great Lakes Restoration Fund about 2.5 years ago to put this in. We're the only watershed in Michigan working with them. The other watersheds are in Minnesota, outside of Minneapolis, upstate New York, and right around Cleveland, Ohio. Their grant unfortunately came to an end in August of last year, so the devices aren't currently tracking information. So our goal is to get enough funding secured so that we can turn these back on for the spring paddle season. Now, the cost of each device is $1,500 per year. We're looking for a partnership from the Park and Rec and / the Village of Holly to help fund that project. The coalition is going to be applying for grant funding to fund our portion based on how many other partners that we get. So I've already talked to Jerry Walker about this, hope to get in front of the DDA in a couple of weeks when they meet. I've talked to George Cullis for the township, for them to contribute as well. We've got potentially 4 of these units that we're going to put in Genesee County, 2 that are already in Fenton, 1 that's already in Linden, and then a new one that'll be in Argentine Township downstream from Linden. Because when you put in downtown Linden and you head downstream, we don't know what the rest of the information's like. So I'm meeting with the supervisor of Argentine on Friday to ask for his support as well to do this. And then in Shiawassee County, we're looking at probably 4, Shiawassee / Saginaw County, probably 4 devices. Because we picked locations that were both a launch site and a location where we have volunteers going to the river to do water quality monitoring twice a year. And for them, it's important to know how deep and how fast the river is going. Because if it's too deep and too fast, we don't want to put anybody in harm's way, basically. And that just makes common sense. So for this device, if in the Holly area we find 3 sponsors, including us, that's $500 a year, basically. And we had looked at working with the USGS, U.S. Geological Survey. They have a gauge in Owasso, Michigan, which has been there about 20 years. The cost to do one of those gauges is about $20,000 to install it, and then $10,000 to $12,000 a year to maintain it. And we said, great, but no thank you, because the costs are just way too prohibitive. Where this is only $1,500 a year. Much cheaper and less expensive, but really good technology, because it's using cell phone data, solar cells, and this is actually their 2nd generation of the device. Their first one went into the Clinton River, and it looked like a USGS gauge about 6-7 years ago. But this is the 2nd one where we can mount these on bridge decks. So there's a bracket that gets screwed into the bridge deck. It gets secured into the bracket. You plop the whole unit in there, and away we go when you turn it on. If it gets vandalized, and that has happened to a couple of the gauges we've already had in the last couple of years, we get a replacement from Hi-Fi at no cost. And they just tell us how to take it out, put the new one in, and we send the old one back, they fix it, and then put it back into rotation for the next watershed, basically.
Does that go into the water?
No, it just sits above the bridge deck.
Oh.
So
So who puts them in? I'm sorry.
Hi-Fi does, or
Okay.
we'll get local volunteers drilling, or
Okay.
we'll work with Brian and his
DPW.
crew to put it into the bridge deck. Because that's the best way to do is on the bridge deck.
Okay.
And the one we have installed in Linden is actually, we try to install it on the west side of the bridge deck, so you don't see it as you paddle to the launch site. It'll be over your shoulder once you paddle underneath the bridge deck, so you really don't see it, and that's the whole point behind it. They're there, but it's not obvious. So the next time you're in downtown Fenton or downtown Linden, head to South Leroy Street by the Fenton Community Center, or head to North Bridge Street right by Sunshine Kayak, and overlook the side of the bridge deck and you'll see it. But at least the bracket will be there still. 'Cause we told them, if you can take the device out since they're turned off, but don't take the bracket out yet, because we might be able to get them turned back on. So part of my pitch to you is to say, we are interested in supporting this and making a financial contribution. And I say that we have to, go after funding ourselves to pay our share. So if we get the funding, we'll come back to you and say, we got the money to do our share. Will you now contribute, make it an official decision? If we don't get our funding, you have a decision to make. Either increase your share of the cost, or you can opt out and not participate. And then that'll be that. And that's the position I'm giving to every local unit of government, just knowing how your budgets work, having been in municipal government for 18 years. I get it. So I've been presenting to Park and Rec boards and DDAs, eventually probably going to City Council if you decide to support this, because it's got to be approved obviously by your City Council and built into your budget. I get that. And we're hoping that we'll find funding and another alternative mechanism to fund these so we don't have to come back for a local share down the road. That the coalition will take this on full-time as one of our full-time projects. Because I see the value in what this is going to provide for us. So it's important for paddlers to know, but it's also important for local governments to have a handle on if there's a massive increase in water coming downstream, the impact it's going to have on private property and commercial property. We have 6 dams on the Shiawassee River from Davisburg to Byron. One of those give during a high rain event, it'll be just like the Tittabawassee again that we saw at the Midland a couple of years ago. We saw billions of water, gallons of water coming downstream out of those lakes. So if we can inform people ahead of time, there's a massive water coming down, take cover, take care, get your stuff out of the way. It's health, safety, and welfare issues for the residents of Holly. So we're hopeful that we can find a location here. I know on the agenda it says Waterworks Park, but LeGrand Street would be a good location because it's just downstream from the launch site. Academy Road could be another good location, or that footbridge that's behind Holly Charter Academy, just north of the railroad tracks, could be a good location.
That would be a good one.
Yeah, I wouldn't put these near a wetlands area, because wetlands are basically sponges, so if we do have high rain events, they absorb so much water, you really won't see it in the river. But where the river's really channelized, and we got a high rain event, that's where we want to know if there's going to be a spike. We looked at this gauge, we have one in Owasso on M21, right by the Arts Center. And in February of last year, the Shiawassee Sheriff's Department did a drone footage of the ice dams that were melting, because we had a rain event and it was really unusually warm in February of last year. And the water got to about 12, 13 feet deep. It was just underneath the M52 bridge deck that goes north up to Chesaning. And we looked at our gauge and you could just see the water spiking, the depth of it going up, lasting, and then finally coming back down as that water moved downstream towards Chesaning. So it's important to know throughout the entire water system, how deep is the river itself and how fast is she flowing. So that's my pitch to you. I appreciate any feedback or comments or questions you might have.
You two are, is that the amount you want to install in?
We're looking just one here in the Holly area.
Oh.
One in the area,
So,
because we don't have
Are
one
you
here.
gonna go to the township meeting too? Because if it's Academy, that would be,
Well, what were the 3 spots again? Because
The-
the bridge,
LaGrange.
LeGrand,
Yeah,
a little,
would be one good location.
LeGrand, okay.
Maybe
There's-
Academy Road.
one right behind Holly Academy, there's a little green bridge.
Yep.
Right, well,
Yeah.
well, that's private property and also in the township.
Okay,
And then
Okay.
Academy is in the township, so LeGrand would be the only one that would be in the village proper.
there we go. Yeah, I mean, they can install these, this could be installed at Waterworks Park, but it would have to go onto a rather large pole that gets
Right.
hammered into the ground. And they've done that before. But, bridge decks are better because it's more consistent. You don't see it as you paddle underneath it, basically. And it seems to work better when they're on bridge decks, because they're easily accessible if you've got to replace it, basically.
I know as you go up the river, it gets a lot, it gets
Wider.
but, yeah, it gets wider,
Yeah.
there's more water,
Yeah.
basically. But Brian, would it flooding in that, is that happened in Holly or, really high rivers?
Yeah, we had the 2 summers ago now, it'll be 2 summers, we had all that rain and.
We've
we
had it
the
dangerously
2 or
high
3
for
500-year
our-
events, 100-year events, and.
Okay.
yeah, we
Dangerously
got-
high for kayakers, not
For
necessarily
Yeah,
for.
yeah, I
That's
definitely
what I'm
dumped my
asking.
kayak 2 years ago on the Shiawassee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it would be nice to know before you go out that this is a risk, especially if you're going out with kids.
But if it's dry, between here and Fish Lake Road is very shallow,
Yeah.
so a lot of people complain because there's no reporting of it, so.
You
Right.
don't know
And
you
they
got
have
her
to, they have
out.
to portage
Right.
quite a bit, then once they get past Fish Lake Road, then it widens out and you get more
You
of
get
a.
into marshlands and
Yeah.
it's easy, yeah, it's a lot easier to get through, yeah.
When it reads the water level, is it straight below it or does it kind of
Straight
fan
below it.
out a little bit?
Straight below it. Yeah, and then we can, with volunteers, calculate the flow depth, the flow
Right.
rate. And then those figures can be worked into each individual gauge by Hi-Fi, so we'll know uniformly how deep, how fast it's
Right,
going.
right.
Or how slow and how shallow it is too.
Right, yeah, that was just my concern is under the bridges it tends to get deeper.
Yeah, 'cause it
So,
does kinda carve out.
right, so
Yeah.
it might look like the water
Further,
level's
yeah.
higher there than if it was further down somewhere.
But if it's constantly measuring, it would pick that up.
Right,
Yeah,
just the
we're-
sheer volume, yeah.
Because you can ping, once the device is active, you can ping it every single minute to see what the depth is, just like that. It's pretty spectacular technology that they've come up with, that you can read this stuff off your smartphone before you even show up. So as a lot of people would, put on either Headwaters Trail or Keepers or Friends social media pages, hey, what's it like in this section of the river? I would quickly post the link to the nearest gauge and say, hey, go check this out. It'll tell you real time how deep it is or how shallow the river is. I mean, I've been in the river in Argentine where it's just, you're dragging butt on the bottom of the river, and it's an awful, and I get out of my boat, pick it up, and carry it back to our launch site.
Speaking of cell phone pings, is it telling you in real time who's on the river with their phone?
No, that it doesn't, I don't believe it captures that. I'll have to ask Brandon if he knows if it's capturing user data that way, but it for the users, just
I know there's a
captures-
lot of that
Yeah.
most people don't realize and that your phone is sending to
Sure.
anything that's gonna capture.
Yeah, that's true. I'll have to ask, I haven't had that question before, I'll have to ask him
Okay.
if he knows how many users are using it. I mean, we really only know, in terms of people going to the website, how many visits it's getting, but not individual users per se.
Now, the $1,500, that covers the device too, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, so what is that $1,500? What's needed for that upkeep? Is it to somebody to read it and then transfer that data to somewhere that the public can access it in?
Oh, it's fed back
95.
automatically to their website for Hi-Fi. The Friends group of the Shiawassee actually have a couple of widgets for the gauges in their communities on their front page for their organization. So they've constructed it specifically just for Shiawassee County, from Corona to New Haven, basically, to say this is what the water's like.
So what's the $1,500 annually for
That
then?
device, maintenance and repairs, and if we have to swap it out, basically.
Like insurance on if it breaks?
If it vandalizes or it disappears, we've had that happen, like, hey, it's reading, 3 inches, but the device, and I went and checked, I'm like, the device is not here on the bridge deck. So somebody probably took a baseball bat to it, knocked it into the river, and so we just called Hi-Fi, and they sent us a new gauge, basically, UPS or FedEx, and then told us how to install it. There's a couple of bolts on the side that you use to install it to the bracket.
So that has the battery. This is,
Yeah, it's a solar cell powered device.
there's a battery there. And it-
Yeah, well, it's a battery that collects the energy, but everything that's on the glass are all solar cells, so it collects
Right.
the energy
Goes to
from the
the
sun.
battery.
Yes. To
And you're-
keep it powered up.
And you're talking about only one for the
Only
Holly
one.
area. So
Yeah.
this is something that we would split with the township
Hopefully,
as
yes.
well as the village. Okay.
Yeah, and hopefully with the DDA too.
So-
if it falls within their district.
So that the real cost would be this 375 that you have in the
If we find
parentheses.
4 partners, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then also, let's say that we are paying to maintain our machine, or, but the other communities up and downstream are not. Is it still going to give that information of our area? Or is it
So the
dependent
way
on
we're
all
gonna
of the network?
Work this is, we're gonna have a master contract with Hi-Fi, so they'll bill us for all the devices, and then individually we'll bill all our partners.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll pay the one bill to Hi-Fi, and we'll collect the money from all of our partners that wanna do it. And as long as the device is paid for, and we could do that on an annual basis, quarterly basis with each of our partners, we'll figure all that out. The device will be turned on and up and running, so we'll have a whole network. And I'm guessing we'll have, out of the 15 we currently have, probably 8 that will actually be active.
But if we only had one, is it still that one's gonna work?
Yes.
Or, okay, so it's not dependent on the whole network
No, it's
being
not
up?
dependent on the whole network, no.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, okay.
Yeah, it's something new, but it's a way of sharing information up and down the river so we know the depth and the flow of this. Because we've seen, at least in our part of it over in Genesee County, an increase, and you probably have seen it here obviously too, of paddlers coming into the river and coming
Yeah.
into your community.
Yeah.
We do moonlight paddles on our mill pond in Linden with the
Yeah.
keepers group, so they start at like 6:30, 7 o'clock at night during the summertime. They paddle upstream into the lakes. We go to a restaurant for beer and pizza, and we paddle back at night. So it's one up and back, but it gives you a very different perspective of what the river looks like. And we do that on Lobdell Lake as well. So we just park and drop, paddle, have some adult beverages and food, and come on back. And it's a really fun time and good experience. And I noticed that you're talking about some kayak launches, the kayak company coming in.
Right.
That's gonna drive participation here in Holly big time, which is good, because you want folks coming in and spending money locally, buying pizza, getting gas, maybe doing some overnight stays, and definitely making repeat trips, because
Yeah.
that's the important part.
Just a note to the commission here, in my opinion, even if we don't have it placed inside of the village at the one location, we still, it's gonna be a benefit to anybody using the river in our village park. And it might make it much easier for the township to swallow doing that if it is split 4 ways. I think that we should consider doing that if it's split 4 ways like that. I'm not really in agreement with trying to put in $1,500 into our budget, in our measly budget annually, but splitting it 4 ways like that, I think is a very responsible way to manage a big asset of our park. Well, thank you. You guys have any other questions for him at all? No. No? Okay, thank you so much for coming and seeing us. Okay, moving along. So, budget requests. I want $2,000 for Halloween. What else do you guys want?
$375 for a gauge.
And I want $375 for a gauge. So budget, you guys. How do you guys? How do you want to prioritize money that we will be allocated to use this year? Last year, we allocated, it was right around 2,000, I think, or 1,500, was it, or 1,800 for music in the parks?
How much you say?
It was right around 2,000, it was, maybe it was 1,800. I would like to just, we are no longer needing to fund music in the parks because the chamber's taking that over, and it was very successful last year, and they're very interested in doing it again this year. My suggestion is that we can take that money and transfer that to Halloween, and then that will be just a parks-funded event. Not to say that those contributing in the past cannot. We'll gladly take their contributions, but it'll basically pay. We want to have money set aside to pay for the cider, the donuts, and we might even be able to do a little bit of advertising. or candy. Candy was a huge expense that would be very helpful to the businesses. But I would like to just transfer that money instead of having that freed up for something else or just go away. The reason for that is because it was very difficult to fundraise this year. Because after COVID, it's very hard to find sponsorships. And then the sponsorships that I did find, I then found out later, did not sponsor other things locally because they were sponsoring that. And I don't want to take from other events, but it's an extraordinarily successful event. This will be our 30th or 28th year, something like that. I definitely want to see that it continues for the town. I think that it is good, moving on to a different subject, I think it's good to allocate money for the gauge as long as the other partners are going to do that. And then also the split rail fencing at Lakeside Park and Waterworks Park. I'd like to see that, the fencing get replaced at Waterworks. And then the cyclone fence, replace it with split rail fence this year.
What? Cyclone fence?
And water.
The cyclone fence, the chain link fence
Right, yeah,
at Lakeside Park.
definitely.
I'd like to take that down and
Mhm.
replace that
Oh,
with split rail.
Some of it is down. now,
Yes,
Yeah.
some of it is
Take it all down.
along the parking lot,
Right,
to be
right.
more specific.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we'll tackle that other section at a different
Right.
time, but yeah.
And maybe some plantings to go along with that.
Right now, I'm just focused on the fence.
You mean the
But yeah, that would be
fence
great.
That goes to the cemetery, that side of the park?
Yeah, along the parking lot. So we
Yeah,
don't want to just
between
take
the
that
parking lot and the
fence
basketball
down.
court.
Because there's a parking lot out front
Yeah, that's,
to the side, so.
that's true.
Correct, right. So the concern about taking the fence down and just taking it down is that we don't want to allow the opportunity for cars to drive onto the grass. So we would want to replace it with something that, I mean, obviously, a split rail fence isn't going to stop a car, but it's certainly a deterrent.
Sure.
And it's just more aesthetic.
Mm-hmm.
And the fence that's there is,
It's ugly.
yeah, thank you. I
Well, the
agree.
rocks
It was a bad idea from the get-go.
What's that?
The rocks they put there, looks good.
Those look good, yes. I agree. But we don't have more rocks free that I know of. What we talked about the cost on that fencing before. Is it about the same?
I'd have to confirm with curtains. I mean, lumber goes up and down anymore, like everything else. Rocks are $50 to $60 a ton, so we could compare more rocks. And then there was also talk of putting in groups of trees as a deterrent, so that people, if we got some 2 to 2.5 inch caliber trees and group those in there, so we could still maintain around them, but you wouldn't be able to get a vehicle in between them. And then
Mhm.
they would grow into nice shade trees along there. So-
That's a great idea too, but wouldn't that be more costly than a split rail?
If we
thought
did it
the-
in phases, no. I mean, and you have to look at insulation too, because like I mentioned before, that DPW is limited in the number of guys, so to tie those guys up, we still are up and about mowing. I mean, last year we had to contract it out because we couldn't get anybody to apply for seasonal help, so
Mm-hmm.
there's a cost involved there that takes away from budgets, and so.
Does that seem like it's going to be the same this year?
I'm hoping not. I was able to hire one kid last year, and he said he was coming back, and I'm gonna start advertising and see where we're at. But we still need to make sure that everything gets mowed, and
Yeah.
from the get-go, from Memorial Day until July, depending on the weather, is always, sometimes, some things have to be cut twice a week versus once a week, so.
Right. Okay, what else would you guys like to see as a priority for budgeting for this year? Well, don't all speak at once. You got your swings. What else would you like
That's very nice.
to see?
Have we talked about like pickleball courts out there at Lakeside?
We have in the past,
And
yes.
it's like the largest growing sport right now.
Yes, it sure is. We also have discussed the, a request to, was it to resurface? Is that what they were asking us to do? And what was the cost on that, do you remember?
Not right offhand, but, I mean, asphalt costs are associated with fuel costs, so I'm sure this year is not gonna be any cheaper, but I thought it was around 40 or 50 grand. For some reason, that sticks in my mind.
Joe Hutchins had an idea of how, something to do that would help with improving the condition of the court, but it was much cheaper. Do you remember what that was?
Probably put an overlay, not an overlay, but, like they do with the tennis courts, they can put an epoxy on there, and they can put it on a little bit thicker, so.
Is that something that court would benefit by?
I'd have to have somebody that does it come out, take a look and see. I know in our community, we did it with the tennis courts. And they put it on a little bit thicker, it fills all the cracks in, and then they just restripe it. We
That's
did add
definitely something to invest in. It's a possibility that would be a good investment, because she has a great point. It's not only a hugely growing sport, but it's very popular in our area.
Yeah, we have 3 courts at Lakeside currently,
Okay.
so.
And they did come to us a couple months ago, right at the end of the year, requesting some improvements made because of, it's a lot of cracks.
Yeah.
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 So, yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up. That would be definitely something to check into. Do you know a company that does epoxy, or?
I don't know if they're still in business. They were, when I was with this other community, they were, I believe they're out of like Rochester, Troy area.
Do you think it's possible that we could get some estimates on what something like that would cost us?
I can try to
And
find if they're
and
still
how
in
soon it could
business.
be done? All right. Okay, anybody else have anything that they'd like to add for budgets? Katrina? No swan songs?
When do we need to know? Do we have
The next meeting will probably be
Yeah.
the latest, because we'll start doing, budget hearing meetings in April, and then they approve the budget in
June, I think.
June, yeah. But everything is pretty much wrapped up by May. It's just a formality in June.
So that would give us some time to think about it, and then when we do our walk through the park,
Yeah, I think that'd be a bit,
we might have
yeah.
a better idea.
What
Mhm.
about that area on Waterworks where that grass was like dying? We talked about that the last walkthrough.
Oh.
We still don't know what's causing that,
Right.
as
Did
far
you
as I
ever
know,
look into
right?
that?
Is it in the south end of the park?
Yeah.
That used to be a parking area, so it's just, it's not good soil underneath it.
Oh. I never noticed that.
So that's an option, I mean, so you'd have to like put soil down
You'd have to rip
Mm.
that
Yeah.
out.
Might-
Surfaces underneath
I
it.
would put that kind of low on our list,
Yeah.
though, because it's not a terrible eyesore.
and, no,
We've got a lot more that are. Another thing that comes up a lot is ice skating rinks. Those are very expensive. Those would be very cool for this time of the year. I want to say, so in order to really, like what you see in other communities, like Frankenmuth, Detroit, who else has an ice skating rink?
the bar
Sterling Heights, you
restaurant
said?
has one and it's free at certain times.
So so I know that Frankenmuth and then Detroit, those are
Grand
not,
Grand Lake has one.
yes, but I don't know if it's the same kind. So there's ice skating rinks where they are self-cooled, so it doesn't matter if you have, if you have higher temperatures, you can still have ice. Like for instance, because we looked into this for Dickens, and it was like $40,000 to $80,000 for these rinks, but in Dickens, for instance, you get 50-degree days, so we don't have ice always. So that's the only way to go about it. Now, a year like this year, if we were, that's really the only, that would be getting the most use, is a rink like that, because we only just now had our temperatures drop. you know. But we have iced over the parking, or not the parking, but the cement area under the pavilion, but we have a ton of cracks in there. If we're gonna add water to that, that's gonna just create more of an issue with that. That whole thing needs to be repaired. And then in addition to that, it was also, the quality of the ice has to be maintained well. Like, we need a Zamboni, right?
I don't know if we need
Not
a
for that small of a
Zamboni.
space.
Yeah.
Well, no, so here's what's happening was, it's only good for like the first couple of days. It gets all tore up, and then it's just a trip hazard, and it's hazardous to use. It's a liability.
I asked my
The quality
husband
of ice
about
isn't
it
good.
because he grew up on a lake and they used to make little ice rinks out there, and that's why I asked him. I'm like, how hard is it to
Yeah.
kind of maintain it? And I mean, he didn't seem like it was overwhelming to do. Just you would have to have somebody, you know.
It also depends on how much use it gets.
Right.
So if you have a backyard rink where it's just your kids, it's different than maybe like for the Frankenmuth one, for instance, they do use a Zamboni, and they do it twice a day or 3 times a day, because that's how much use it gets. Anyway, just to point out that we have definitely explored that. I think everybody on this commission would love to have that if funds were not an option, but it's extraordinarily expensive, and it's just not something that's in our budget right now. So for budget, can we put budget as an item, an agenda item next month? And commissioners, can we each put some homework into it? Survey people that you know, survey your neighbors, survey through social media, go through our old notes, go through our master plan. Let's put together a list, and then we'll go through those lists. We'll go over that at the next meeting, and we'll just, what are our hot items? How do we want to categorize them?
I have a question with budget, Brian. The gazebo, is that fully funded and budgeted out now? Or is that still, the gazebo at Waterworks, is there still costs that need to be incurred?
Yeah, there's still costs there. I have to see what's left in this year's budget, once the weather breaks in springtime, so,
So that's has to be considered as well, right?
yeah.
So,
I thought money from last year's budget was used for that.
Well, they haven't been purchased this year's budget, so it's this year's budget, not last year's, this year's budget, so the current budget, yes.
Okay, it's not
but not
the
for
next
the coming
one.
one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Got it, okay.
So that's covered in
As long
current.
as, as long as no money was spent between now and then, so.
Okay.
But there's gonna be costs associated with the new play structure too, because that doesn't include the softball, and it doesn't include,
I thought we did factor all of that information in.
well, it's $100,000, that doesn't include I don't have but I have to look at that, that didn't include some of the other, incidentals with that, so.
How much did you guys receive in total? I thought it was 150K from ARPA,
I
right?
thought so
Mhm.
too.
So then it's 100K for the structure, and then the other 50K.
Yeah, it was a little bit over, but I thought it was only 100, but I'll have to go
Okay.
back.
It was close to 100. I think it was just a tiny bit over.
Yeah, but I thought the ARPA funding was only 100.
I'll double check, but I thought it was 150. But yeah, I could be wrong on that too.
We'll go with hers.
The problem is, it's been spoken for in other places, so that's there
Okay.
was money spent. The 150 I know was budgeted for the backhaul, and then there was, I think, $100,000 for the police department and 150,000.
Yeah, it all got
So the 100 and
spread.
150, there were several hundreds and 150.
Right, right.
150,000 allocated to different things, so.
Okay. So can you get that onto our agenda for next month?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, so let's move on, guys. So kayak rentals in Waterworks Park. That's exciting.
Yes. It took me a couple times, but I finally did have my Zoom meeting with them.
Okay.
There's an initial investment of $18,000 for one site, and if we wanted to have 2 sites, it's $25,000. That's 4 lockers with 4 kayaks with paddles and equipment. So paddle, kayak, and a life vest. The village would receive 70% of the rental fees. It's a 5-year contract. with no renewal fees after the initial contract. So once this initial investment of 18 or 25,000 is in the first 5 years, then the equipment is just an ongoing thing. The contract will give us 5 full rental seasons, so if we didn't approve this till July of this year, we would get this year's free, and then we'd get 5 more seasons after this as part of that initial investment. Like I said, they start out with 4 lockers full of equipment, which is a kayak, vest, and paddle, and the lockers themselves. It's all done with a QR code, or somebody uses their smartphone, gets a QR code, they open it up. The parent company of this company is started out with bike rentals and the scooter rentals, so then they branched off to this kayak rental. If the average number of lockers is sold out more than 3 hours per week, and they keep track of that, they would increase the lockers to 8 or 12 at no additional cost. So if they found that the kayaks were getting used the majority of the time, then they would come out and add additional lockers and equipment. Rental fees would be set by the village, and the national average, they said right now, is $15 to $20 an hour. So, then the company hires a person, the village doesn't have anything to do with it, they hire a person to come and maintain the equipment, the lockers, make sure they're full, make sure the stuff gets returned to it. Currently in Genesee County, Parks has one at their Bluegill boat launch in Flint, and Delhi Township near Lansing, and Spring Lake will be starting this spring as part of this program.
I know Ann Arbor has a program sort of like that as well.
Yeah, this company I talked to, they started out, and I think Genesee County asked for 12, so they have 12 at the Bluegill boat launch.
How often are they rented out? Are they rented out?
They didn't have a lot of data because this was the first year for
Right.
Flint and
Okay.
Delhi and Spring Lake.
Right,
starting
and it's
this
winter
year.
now, so-
But once you rent it, you're on the hook until you bring it back. It's all based on a QR code. It's not,
Right,
but we set the price. If we want to do $20 an hour, if you figure there's only 4 lockers there and you're averaging, $80 to $100 on a weekend day or whatever it is for a couple hours, you're looking at 2.5, 3 year payback before we get to that, or they start to increase that. Because of where we're located on the Shiawassee River, I talked with them about partnerships with neighboring communities such as Holly Township, where they could go from here to Fish Lake Road, leave them there. They could have lockers there. The township would be on the hook for there, but what they said they've done in our communities is they put a post in what they lock, and they lock the kayak there, and then the person they hire goes and picks that up and brings it back to our
Yeah.
lockers, so that equipment always stays with
Right.
that locker. And you could partner farther down with Fenton or Linden if someone wanted to go all the way down to Bush Lake or Bush Park in Fenton or somewhere, their mill pond or Linden's mill pond, then they would have these things set out there. And if they wanted to have their own kayak lockers, then they would partner with, they would, absorb that cost, but they would have the ability to, I don't know if they have trackers, GPS trackers on the boats, how they know where they end up at, but, so.
Right.
right.
So if you have
Tags.
a party of 4, rents the kayaks, and just keeps going downstream,
That's.
but they're
that's all they
paying
do.
per the hour.
Right, they're paying for the hour, so,
Okay.
yeah.
It's like a 6-hour paddle to Fenton if
Yeah,
it's slow.
yeah.
So
It's a decent amount of time.
6 hours to Fenton.
It was about 3 hours to finish.
well, okay.
Scott Park.
Depending on
They
how
don't
slow you're
sit
going.
and just
Yeah, if you're
relax.
if you're going slow. You're towing children.
Yeah, right, right.
Yes, if we don't have a partnership.
throw you
with
out
the
there or
Strong Park
anything,
where they
but-
can just lock it up and leave it, then they'd be able to hit the QR code on that post and say, this is where we left it. Then the company would be responsible to go to Strong Park and pick it up, and then the fees would stop. But if you would have to figure out, hey, we're gonna end up at Strong Park, and that's where then we're gonna have to bring it back and drop it back off at the locker for the fees to stop. Is my understanding of it. So this was the general summary I got. I said I would present this at tonight's meeting. If there was more questions, I could get back a hold of them and email them back and forth.
Definitely.
What does it cost to rent a kayak in Linden? You would know that probably, right?
Actually, I don't know. I can jump on Sunshine.
I want to say it's like $15 for like the afternoon. Way more expensive it would be to do that.
Well, the
a
village
kayak
has the
trip
ability
in
to set the
village.
price.
Yeah.
So it's market price. He said the national average right now is $15 to $20 an hour. I know when we do the Rifle River, the costs have increased astronomically over the last few years
Yeah.
because of all kinds of factors, fuel costs and stuff like that, but, I mean, we rented large tubes to go down the river, and they were $90 for that trip, and that was, they
A
averaged
day
that
trip
trip
though,
out to
right?
about 4 hours.
Right.
Oh,
So, I
4.
mean, you're paying $25,
So according to Sunshine's website, if you go into Mill Pond, you go upstream because you go up and flow back.
Right.
A 2-hour trip is 30, 3 hours is 35, and 4 hours is 40. If you go downstream, it's 1.5 hour paddle to Hogan Road is $40.
'Cause then they have to bring it back.
You have food rentals. And then they will go and drop off the equipment and pick you up and
Right.
bring it back to the facility.
My question is, if David, if I could ask a member of the public, do many people want to rent? Because I thought everybody was buying kayaks these days.
No, it's, Sunshine, when they started 100 years ago, they
Okay.
probably had 30 boats. And at the end of every season, Gary Messenger, the previous owner, kept buying more boats, used kayaks from other vendors around the
Mhm.
state. And he kept that going every year because he just saw
It's growing.
explosive growth. And the new
Yeah.
owners are seeing the same thing. They keep it increasing their inventory.
Okay, so,
Single-use kayaks. They haven't, I think they have 1 or 2 tandems, but most are single-use. They're probably up to 50 or 60 boats by now.
The problem that they ran into was during COVID, everybody bought kayaks, so you couldn't find a kayak for a long
Right.
time.
right,
So if you did not have your own equipment and wanted to do something outdoors, you were, you were stuck.
Up the
because-
creek without a paddle, literally.
Yeah, you were paying a premium or trying to beg, borrow, and steal from somebody to.
interesting.
I also, when I saw this, I thought we were going to have a company come in and do sort of like what Sunbelt does. I didn't realize you were looking at the lockers, because I looked at some as well, that these ones don't require like any contracts. And
I'm waiting to get another contact from the police chief. 'cause
yeah, I was gonna say I can forward this
Yeah,
on
it
to
is
you,
over
because
at
these
Makeaway.
ones are like for 4 slots, $7,100. Now that is just the locker
Right.
without the kayaks and other things.
Right.
And this one runs off of a credit card. You swipe your credit card, take it out, and then you would have to re-swipe that credit card to
Now,
put
is-
it back
is the-
in.
would the village be responsible for maintaining that? Because this, we don't maintain anything.
Yeah, we would. Yeah,
So then you have to
absolutely.
hire
A lot of
person.
people, like they were saying, they build sort of like a gazebo over it,
But-
a
but
wood
then But then you
structure.
have to have a person there to make sure the equipment, the lockers get maintained and opened and closed. Where this, they supply the person, there's no cost to us for that. In
Right.
addition to-
Well, there is, because there's the
$25,000.
right
But that's
18 to
one-time
25.
fee forever.
Right.
Where this one here, we pay $7,100, but we have to find someone to work at those lockers every year and maintain it. And if that person doesn't show up and nobody can get a locker, or someone steals something, then
Right.
we're maintaining the equipment, we're maintaining that, so.
Yeah, I'm just saying, it's good to have a couple different
No,
options of things
I
to
don't
look
disagree.
at.
I mean, we talked about trying to find a local, even with the place in Linden, that if we
Right.
partnered with them to say, hey, well, you can use this as a drop-off site or. put
Yeah,
some-
Heavner's I know does.
Right, and they had.
out there
they
in
had approached
Milford.
the village before, and then I don't know what happened, they never followed
Yeah.
up with it. But these people, they approached me, they sent me an email, and said, yeah, are you interested? And I knew there was interest, so I said, yes. It took a while to get a Zoom call. I mean, I think they're fairly new at the boat side of it, so they're pushing, so every time I tried to zoom in, it was like they're on another meeting.
Okay.
So it took several times to get through to them, and I think they just used the same Zoom number for everything. And but once I was able to talk to them, they were very, this is how they've set it up, and I think they're basing it on experience with their bike rentals and their scooter rentals, and they're just branching out in other areas. So
It is an interesting concept. This is the first I've heard of it. I'm intrigued by it
yeah,
because it would bring traffic.
Amen.
You just gotta figure out where you take out and how you secure a boat if you can't bring it back.
Yeah.
Because you do have, even under this scenario, you've gotta park a vehicle downstream.
Right.
Mhm.
And get back. So if you're bringing it back, but if you go partner with Fenton, so they can then lock up the boat on site there, that makes life even easier
Right.
for the user. And that's nice.
And I was
Especially the
looking
user
at it
that
from a
doesn't own their own
standpoint of
kayak.
Yeah.
we have personnel constraints now.
Yeah.
By adding more to it, you know, the first time somebody doesn't get, you know, what they need, you know, social media blows up and we're the bad guy because, you know, you told me I was gonna have a kayak and I got there and there was nobody there to help me and I couldn't use it and I couldn't do anything. And with this, they take full responsibility.
Of the maintenance, yeah.
So, I mean, there may be some more upfront costs here, but, so that's where we need to get all the information, we can compare apples to apples,
Exactly.
oranges to oranges, so. I think it's a great concept, but it, like I said, there's a lot of logistics still to figure out, so.
But to stay competitive with other rental companies in the area, $10 an hour would be more competitive. That would be,
Yeah, it seems.
and $40 an hour, or $40 for a 90-minute trip, which includes they have to go and retrieve the boat and they bring it back. So yeah, we just have to weigh that out. So if we were gonna put that initial investment in there, how long would it take us, do we expect with 4 kayaks to get a return on that?
Yeah, an ROI.
Now, I don't think that we need to try to look for a profit-making entity, but I also don't wanna invest a bunch of money that we're never gonna see again, too.
Yeah. But it is a good idea, because a
Yeah,
lot of
it's
people
very
kayak.
intriguing.
Well, and then, like I said, they track all the information, so if they see that the average number of lockers has been sold out more than 3 hours per week, which is not a lot on a weekend, I mean, especially with our park and.
It's
van.
using it once
So
on this river.
They would, the next season, increase that to 8 lockers or
Yeah.
12 lockers based on the data they see.
Right.
My concern is if we start out with 4 and a family of 4 shows up or a family of 5 and there's only 3 lockers there, people are gonna
Right.
get discouraged and say, you know, it's a great idea, but there's never
not
any
enough.
equipment there.
Yeah,
So,
Right.
well, how do you know?
Well, that's the thing, we would have to be trying to make our money on 4
Well,
initially.
just the first year, because if they were sold out, which
Yeah.
in a nice weekend, you're
Then
gonna be
we
sold
double.
out pretty much every day,
Right,
then they would see that data, the next year they would have 8.
okay.
And then,
Who,
so,
who's the company again, Brian?
Yeah, it doesn't say the name of them.
We want to be a test site, see if it,
I always
well,
worry about
they already
something going
have,
out
they
of
already have
business, too.
one that's close in Flint, so at their Bluegill boat launch in Flint, so, I mean,
Yeah.
that's fairly close for,
I would like to know too, what kind of staff they have. Are they gonna be able to get those?
they
Those boats
hire
back
someone
the same
locally
day.
that's familiar with the area, so they advertise and they hire that person before the season starts, they train them, and then that person's responsible, and they've said they've never, based on what they pay, they've never had an issue getting someone to work for them for any of these boat launch, or for this thing, so.
I don't know, we have a lot of issues with that around here. Getting people to work for them.
They probably pay better.
Yeah, maybe. But Chris brings up a valid point. What if they go bankrupt? What if they go out of business? What happens to we get to keep 4
It's like
kayaks
the-
for 25 grand?
Well, no, 18 grand. It's at 2 sites. Because the other site I saw was a boat launch
Oh, that's
on
right.
Bush Lake. People could just, they couldn't leave there. They could just, there you just get the hour ride and go around the outside of the lake or across the lake, whatever, and come back. Then that one might take a little bit longer.
Mhm.
oh, something to think about.
Rent,
Mhm.
rent
Put
period
it on our
fund.
budget list. What's it called?
Rent period fund is what
Rent
let me
off
see if she's got a better.
Rent period?
or dot.
www.rent.fund.
Fun?
Fund, F-U-N.
That's clever. Rent fun.
So,
Well, thanks, Brian.
Yeah.
You were right, we are interested in that.
I mean, I bought two when I opened, because, I mean, not saying I'm cheap, but I look at it from a village standpoint, $18,000 is a large investment for one of our parks. And for especially a seasonal activity, you know, if we have a late spring and an early fall, that window closes in and we're trying to make that, you know, some of the advantages I seen was that, you know, we get it for 5 full years. So, I mean, if we can get that first year, you know, we end up with a great summer and people rent them, and the next year we have 8 lockers there, that, I think 8 lockers is more advantageous than
Yes.
4 lockers.
Yeah.
But they said, well, you can increase that, but they want initial cost up front. So it sounds like they try to recoup all their funding up front, and then we're getting it back 70, you know, they're still getting 30% of the rental fees, Well, they said we have complete control over the cost, so maybe we start out low, so that we raise those numbers that they, you know, but, you know, but there's just a different options, and like I said, the police chief said they have one in Lake Orion that is, so he's supposed to give me that information, and,
Okay, I gotta back up a little bit, I'm sorry, a couple dumb questions. 18,000 is more than our total budget. The
well,
15. So
this
it
would be
the-
something we'd have to budget for this coming
Right.
budget,
Oh, okay, for this coming budget?
this upcoming budget, yes.
Right, so I mean, how would that? it would
Well,
be the-
there's
I
also,
would have
there's
to
also
convince my
grant
fellow
money, there's
council members to
grant,
get
there's
on
other
that.
opportunities to get money besides,
All
like,
right, I mean, it would just be part of our 15,000 would go toward that, or?
I don't think so. I think
None
that's
of
gonna
it?
get pretty well spent, our
Yeah,
$15,000.
Yeah, right, so I can't see.
But
Okay,
is
so it would
this
be
something we
other-
wanna pursue? We would have
Right.
to come up with funding.
So, Brian, you personally, you think it's a good idea?
I think it's a hard pill to swallow, the initial investment for
Okay.
4 lockers. That's where,
Okay,
you know,
Agreed.
that's where I
Right.
see, so
That's-
I mean, I don't, I mean, looking at other options, you know, partnering with an established kayak rental place to say, hey, you know, if we built you a shed here and you stored equipment here or something, and you came and took care of it, opened the shed and gave the people the equipment, because that's what they do up north, they have sites and they take you
Right.
there and they
Right.
take the equipment with them on a bus with you, or you get there and they're opening up, they have a shed that's opened up and there's paddles and pads and kayaks or canoes, whatever there is there, and then they stock those up based on what the reservations they have for the weekend and go from there. So, I mean,
Right.
there may be, you know, there's disadvantages here. I mean, once we do the investment, we're
Right.
done. I mean, it's hands off for the village except for making sure that we get our 70% of the
Okay.
rentals and tracking that and making sure that it doesn't get vandalized or, you know, is in
Right.
disrepair because they, you know, they skip town or whatever it is, so. But if, I mean, they skip town, it's not hard to weld a padlock on there and then we've got 4 kayak lockers.
Yeah,
for
there
people
you
to
go.
rent or whatever too, so.
Well, I mean,
Right.
me personally, I like the idea of
I don't.
taking a business like this, rentfund.com or whatever it is, and leasing them a section of the park and letting them pay us to run their business there and do exactly what they're doing and not pay us a percentage of their fees.
Well, and I don't think that's not how
That's not how this goes at all.
No, and
but
that's why I said
that's something that would be more up our alley.
Right, so, I mean, that would be something that we'd have to find a company that actually does that, or, you know, a
Right.
local company or a local entrepreneur that's looking to say, hey, this is something I can do, you know, in the summer months, and then I do something else in the winter months, so.
Right.
But, they approached me, and at first, I'm like, yeah, we got 2 spots that this will work out great, and they didn't say anything about initial costs in any of the emails, and then, when they set up the Zoom meeting, they sent me this summary, and I opened it up, and I'm like, whoa, ouch.
Yeah.
I guess everything's expensive.
I like the discussion though about,
Thanks, Brian.
definitely, I think, this has come up multiple times. We wanna see rentals, kayak rentals in Waterworks Park somehow.
Yeah,
So
well,
I
we
like that
talked
we're
about
discussing it.
kayak lockers, but that doesn't, I mean, you know.
I know.
So, but I think if, you know, it started now, so we've got an idea, you know, we can just keep moving forward with it. This is just the first step and the first thing, like I said.
Well, and especially if we're talking about doing these meters and stuff, it all kind of runs together.
Okay, anything else on kayak
No.
rentals and Waterworks? Okay. Let's move along. Reports.
We had an interview with Shannon Cole. She put in a citizen participation form to be on parks.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
What are we interviewing her about?
we just asked what are, you know, just tell a little bit about it. They started this year with the new council. That's what they wanted to do for commissioners,
Okay.
was to have staff that was liaison for that particular commission, just do interviews and ask questions. We sent a summary that Ryan should have got today from Jerry Walker or early tomorrow. And then he'll make and it looks like it's early enough, she could be on the February, so she could be here for the March meeting, so.
She made it through the interview then.
Well,
You giving her a
we don't,
thumbs
we
up?
don't recommend or anything, staff
Oh.
doesn't recommend, we just ask questions and give
Wanted
information
to
to
know
Ryan,
what
so
to
she.
Sure.
you know,
Isn't it like highly qualified?
We just list what she told us her qualifications were, what, what her interest she had.
Right, because I know that they did that with the last
So they don't have to do
appointee.
the
It was
letter
like
anymore.
highly qualified.
No, they still do.
Okay.
So are you obligated to interview all people that submit a citizen participation for parks, or only
That's
people
the new
that
policy
they
they
send
started
to
with the
you?
new council, so as far as I know, yes, so.
Okay, cool. That's one more thing for you to do.
Yes.
Okay.
And I did get the bill today for the park equipment, so I think that's a good sign that they'll be ready for us. It is on my list to do this month, to get a hold of them and see what they needed from us. Since we, knock on wood, have had a mild winter so far, so we do have, sometimes we'll have to get the old equipment out of there. And then, I might have to call and see where we're at with the slide that they said was under warranty. We still haven't gotten it yet, so,
Yeah, I was gonna ask about that.
yeah, so,
That slide that's under warranty is for the one,
That's
that
wrapped
part's
in-
gonna be,
That's wrapped in the, snow fence.
yeah,
right
let's
now.
not bring that up.
Yes.
But that is going to remain in
Yes,
place.
all that equipment to the west of the existing play structure will all stay. The
Yes,
stuff that is in the softball area that has a octagon or sidewalk around it, that'll all be removed and replaced with new.
right.
And that's slated for the summer, you're saying, to do that?
Spring, summer, yes.
Okay.
But we're definitely not gonna take apart the existing play structure until we know for sure we have a delivery date on the
Right,
new.
we'll coordinate that with that, so we'll make sure we
Yes.
have enough time to get the old one out and prep the area for them to put the new one in.
Cool. Is that it for reports?
That's
then?
it.
Okay. Board member comments. Amber, we'll start with you.
Don't really, there's nothing really for me to say.
Okay. Katrina? Chris?
Nothing.
Okay, Gail?
No.
All right. Public comment. Is there any public comment? Yes, come on up. Please state your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name is Anna Matson, 15091 Western Valley. I'm going to try to go through quick. You guys talked about a lot today.
That's
In
okay.
terms of the outdoor park, so my background's in market research, and one of the biggest things we find is can people actually talk about it? So, of course, when you put any kind of question out, the initial response is going to be, of course, we want gyms, we want workout equipment, we want an ice skating rink, we want everything.
Right.
But that's something that you more so have to do an experiment, because yes, they say they're going to use it and all this stuff, but will they actually use it?
Mhm.
Right.
So with this outdoor gym, I really feel like it'd only be used when it's very nice outside, not even super hot. I really feel like it'd only be like 2 months out of the year where it's like 60, 70 degrees. So ideally, I would wait on like the grants and everything for something more permanent. I do really want to see a community center. So I have seen all those grants. Oakland County has one just for outdoor, like trails and everything. Like
DNR does one every year.
yes, like I have all that planned out. I really want to see a community center. So looking more forward, more something like that's permanent, like an inside gym, would be really nice. This is a question for you on the gauge. So you're saying $1,500 a year. Is there a purchase option? Because that's like rental where they, is there just, can we buy it outright so we don't have to pay that every year?
That's a good question. Not yet. They're
Okay.
into the commercial side, so they're still trying to figure out the price
Yeah.
points. And I think purchasing this thing outright with a maintenance contract seems smarter.
Yeah, so that's what I figured. So I would suggest that. I don't know. You guys could educate me. Is there like a flea and tick anything that's sprayed at the parks at all? That could be a really good thing. A lot of people. My dog just got Lyme disease because of the ticks in Holly, and all the veterinarians are saying that ticks are really bad in this area right now. So that could be something I think the entire village can agree on. We talk about Lakeside Park a lot. Everyone does, not just you guys. Everyone talks about Lakeside a lot. This is another thing where research would be really nice to have. It is a very nice park. I've been there a couple times, and every time, like the couple times I went, no one was there. No one. So I don't know if that's normal. Is there typically a lot of traffic? I would really like to see money more towards the waterworks to kind of spread out among things. I really like your idea about like renting out the waterworks for a company to deal with, but honestly, I think it's such a good thing for the community, and people always want things for families to do, that I would just say if a company's willing to go there, that they can just use the space. I really would like to see that. In terms of a bathroom in downtown, the DDA is doing that. I think, don't quote me, but I'm pretty sure they're taking care of that, because you guys mentioned Crapo, so. And yeah, more with the kayak, I would just, the good thing about not doing it ourselves is the liability, because right, if the village owns it and someone hurts himself on a locker, it's just a mess. So I would definitely just have another company take care of it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you repeat your name again?
Anna Matson.
Anna Matson. Oh, and you do live in the village?
I do.
And you do know we have a couple of chairs open?
Yes.
My heart is with the DDA.
Oh, well, all of our hearts are with the
But
DDA.
Lakeside is used quite a
Brian
bit.
is just aching to interview more people.
I have nothing but time.
Thank you, Anna, for your input. Very
Thanks,
much
Anna.
appreciated.
Yeah, Lakeside is used quite a bit, I think.
Okay.
It's
Yeah,
it's probably the
It
busiest
is,
part.
yeah.
The township takes an interest in it too and everything, like, a lot of people talk about it, but I never
Yeah.
hear other parks. And I will say, I talked to some people today, that have lived in Holly a very long time, and they didn't even know where Lakeside was.
It's
That's-
confusing
that's
because
kind
you
of an
got the township
oddity.
owns the beach and the village owns the park next to it.
Yeah.
So,
I don't know. I live,
Yeah.
in Mill Point, so that, I don't know, I feel like that's kind of,
You're the north end, yeah.
That's its own world, yeah.
Yeah.
but I'm always downtown, and so I love like the farmer's market, like, that's in the park and everything. I would like to see more funds in that area, because I just feel like everyone's attention on Lakeside Park. That's just my 2 cents.
no, thank you, it was worth it.
Thanks. Okay, any other public comment? No, nothing from the corner?
No.
Okay. All right, so if that's it, then we'll adjourn this meeting at 8:31.
I was gonna say something at the next meeting. and then I'll put something on it.
I never,
wanted
well,
to-
that was a
Well,
For games every 5 minutes. I've got like 1,000 notifications. That's why I can't look at one.
The commission, if you can do that, or do you want to set it up and then
I mean, if it makes you feel better, like I didn't notice you doing it, so.
Well, she has this.
Chris?